Okay, let's talk about something that I honestly didn't see coming. At least not this soon. Apple is reportedly working on an AI wearable pin, and no, I'm not talking about some vague Silicon Valley concept floating around a whiteboard. We're talking about a real project, with real hardware details leaking out, and a potential release window that's closer than you'd think. Now, before you get too excited or too skeptical, let me be upfront. Apple has not officially confirmed any of this, but the sources here are serious. We're talking Bloomberg and The Information, two outlets that don't just throw stuff at the wall. When they report something like this, it's usually because it's actually happening. So let's break it down piece by piece and figure out what we actually know. Now, let's start with the design, because that's where things get genuinely interesting. The device is described as a thin, flat, circular disc, which is basically shaped like an AirTag. The shell is aluminum and glass, which sounds exactly like what you'd expect from Apple. Very clean, very minimal, very much the signature Apple feel that we've all come to either love or spend too much money on. Now, here's the part that I love. Apple apparently wants the final version to be roughly the same size as an AirTag, but because you've got all the hardware crammed inside, it will be a little bit thicker. Think of it as an AirTag that went to the gym. Not dramatically bigger, just a little more substantial. You'll be able to wear it in a few different ways. You can clip it on your clothing, attach it to a bag, or even wear it as a necklace through a hole on the top. And of course, because this is Apple, it charges wirelessly, just like an Apple Watch. No cables, no dongles, no drama. And honestly, the form factor alone already makes me excited. It's elegant, it's unobtrusive, and it doesn't scream, "I have a weird robot strapped to my chest." That's already a massive improvement over what we've seen from the competitors. Next up is the camera situation, and it's a bit complicated. This is where things get a little murky, and I want to be transparent with you about that. The camera setup is one area where different reports actually disagree with each other. Bloomberg says that the pin will have a low-resolution camera, one that feeds information about the surrounding environment to the AI, but it is not designed for taking photos or videos. It would be always on and always recording, purely for contextual awareness, which, by the way, raises some very valid privacy questions that we will get in a second. The Information, on the other hand, says that there will be two front cameras, one with a standard lens and one wide angle, and that these will be able to capture photos and videos. So we've got two credible sources pointing in slightly different directions here. I personally believe more the Bloomberg's report simply because of the size of the AI pin, but who knows? What both reports agree on, though, is that the camera, however it's configured, will be heavily tied to visual intelligence. That's currently an iPhone feature that uses the camera to identify objects, places, and things around you. The idea is that the AI pin essentially becomes the eyes of your iPhone, constantly aware of your environment and ready to help before you even know you need it. That concept genuinely excites me. Imagine walking past a restaurant and your pin already knows you've been meaning to try it. That kind of ambient awareness is what makes this feel like the future and not a gimmick. But there is a question that poses itself, and that is, what can this device actually do? So, it will have at least one microphone for speaking to Siri and picking up sounds around you. But here's something interesting. Apple hasn't fully decided yet whether to include a speaker for back and forth Siri conversations and audio playback. That decision is apparently still in flux. Again, this thing is still in early development, so some specs are genuinely unsettled. Now, let's talk about the AI powering it, because this is arguably the most important part. The AI pin will run the updated version of Siri that Apple plans to unveil with iOS 27. Rest assured, this isn't the Siri we've all been sighing at for at least a decade. Apple is working on a chatbot level upgrade that's meant to put Siri on par with Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. That's the goal. Whether they'll fully pull it off, we'll see, but the ambition is clearly there. Now here's the part that actually shocked me a little. Siri on this device will be powered partly by Gemini thanks to Apple's partnership with Google. Apple, the company that literally built its entire identity on doing everything different from others and in-house, is partnering with Google to power its AI. That tells you everything about how serious the AI race has gotten. Nobody can afford to go in alone anymore, not even Apple. So will the AI Pin replace your iPhone? This is a crucial point, and I want to make sure it's crystal clear. The Apple AI Pin is not designed to replace your iPhone. It's not a standalone device, and it will have a dedicated chip inside, something comparable to the H2 chip in AirPods, but most of the actual processing will be done on your iPhone. Apple employees have reportedly described it internally as the eyes and ears of the iPhone. I think the framing is perfect. It's an extension of your existing device, and it's not a replacement for it. And honestly, I think that that's the smartest approach Apple could take. Here's why. Every standalone AI wearable has failed. Miserably. The Humane AI Pin, made by two former Apple employees, by the way, launched in 2024 with a ton of hype. Couldn't function well without a constant connection to a smartphone anyway, and ended up being discontinued and sold off to HP. The Rabbit R1 had similar problems. These devices tried to stand alone and they couldn't, simply. Apple is learning from that actually, and by making the Pin an iPhone accessory from day one, they're building on a foundation that already works. Now, speaking of the race, Apple isn't the only company chasing this. OpenAI, in collaboration with former Apple design legend Jony Ive, is reportedly working on their own AI hardware device. Their device is expected to be small, pocket-sized, non-wearable, and powered by ChatGPT. There have been some delays, but it's targeting a similar timeframe, around 2027. And then there's Meta's with Ray-Ban smart glasses, which have already done reasonably well in the market. Apple is also building their own smart glasses to compete with those, featuring cameras for both photo capture and environmental context, no embedded display in the lens, and all running on the next generation Siri. So Apple isn't building just one AI wearable, they're building an entire ecosystem of them. The Pin, the glasses, AI-equipped AirPods with infrared cameras, it's a whole ambient intelligence strategy, and I find that vision genuinely compelling. But what could go wrong? I'm gonna be real with you for a second, because I think it's worth acknowledging the challenges here. There are real questions about battery life for one. Always-on devices with cameras and microphones are notoriously hungry for power. There are serious privacy concerns too. An always recording camera pinned to your chest is going to make some people deeply uncomfortable, and rightfully so. Apple will need to handle that very carefully. And then there's the fundamental market viability question. Even if Apple builds the best AI Pin the world has ever seen, does anyone actually want one? The Humane Pin failed. Google Glass failed. The category has a very rough history. Apple's advantage here is that they're not asking it to stand alone, and they have an installed base of iPhone users who are already in the ecosystem. And that matters enormously, but the question still remains, is this market actually viable? And finally, and probably the most important question of them all, when does all of this actually happen? The current expectation, based on everything we know, is 2027 at the earliest. TechCrunch reported that Apple could be planning to ship around 20 million units at launch, which, if true, means that they're taking this very seriously as a mainstream product, not a niche experiment. But I want to be really honest about that. The project still is in early development. It could still be cancelled. Apple tests a lot of ideas that never make it to consumers. This one feels more serious than most leaks, but nothing is guaranteed until Apple actually puts it on stage. What I will say is this: I think this is the most interesting Apple product I've heard about in years, especially since iPhones become literally the same in the past 10 years. And not because it's flashy or sci-fi, but because it feels like a genuine attempt to rethink where personal technology goes after the iPhone. The smartphone era has to end at some point, and ambient AI wearables might genuinely be what comes next. Apple is placing a pretty significant bet on that idea. And that's everything we know about the Apple AI Pin so far. I genuinely believe this could be one of those products that, if Apple gets it right, we'll look back on as a turning point. Kind of like when the iPhone came out and made everything before it feel ancient overnight. But what do you think? Is this the right step forwards from smartphones, or will the AI Pin be abandoned by Apple, or maybe forgotten by the public if released? Give me your thoughts and your opinions in the comment section down below, and don't worry, I'll go through all of them.